You know that feeling when you're a kid and you're told to sit at the kids' table? The one with the paper plates, the crayon drawings, and the little plastic cups? It's a rite of passage. But what if you were 25 years old, with a career, your own apartment, and a life you had built entirely on your own? What if you were still told to sit there, at the kids' table, while your family toasted to their success without you? My name is Leda. For my entire life, I was the black sheep, the free spirit, the artist. My parents, successful architects, never understood my passions. My older sister, Anya, was their perfect daughter, the one who followed in their footsteps, who went to a prestigious university, and who was now working at their firm. Anya was a masterpiece. I was just a sketch. So when my parents invited me to a fancy family dinner at a high-end restaurant to celebrate Anya's new promotion, I was hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally going to treat me like an adult. I spent hours picking out the perfect dress, a simple black gown that made me feel confident and strong. I walked into the elegant dining room with my head held high, ready to be a part of my family. My dad greeted me with a polite nod, a small, insincere smile on his face. He gestured toward the main table, where my parents and Anya were already seated. I started to walk over, but he stopped me. "Leda," he said, a patronizing look in his eyes. "Your place is over there." He pointed to a small, isolated table in the corner. The table had tiny chairs, children's menus, and a single colorful crayon. I felt my face flush with humiliation. My heart sunk. This wasn't a mistake. This was a statement. This was my parents' way of telling me, in front of the whole family, that I would never be a part of their world. I wasn't just left out of the main table, I was relegated to the kids' table, a public declaration of my lesser status. The feeling of betrayal was so sharp, it took my breath away. And in that moment, the hurt turned into something else. It turned into a cold, quiet rage. I knew I couldn't just walk away. They had to pay for this. They had to understand what they had done. I left the restaurant without a word. I didn't cause a scene, I didn't cry, and I didn't scream. I just put one foot in front of the other, my heart a frozen knot in my chest. The image of that small table and that single crayon burning into my mind. The feeling wasn't just humiliation. It was a profound, chilling betrayal. My parents, the people who were supposed to be my protectors, had intentionally shamed me in public. They had treated me like a child, not an adult, not their daughter. But I wasn't that fragile girl anymore. They thought I was just a simple artist, but they had no idea what I had been doing in my so-called art studio. My studio was my lab, a place filled with high-tech equipment, not paintbrushes. My art was cybersecurity, and my canvas was their company's digital fortress. My father, an architect by trade, had built their corporate network with the same overconfidence he used to build their homes, all style and no substance. He thought a few firewalls and the password was enough. He never saw me coming. That night, I began my work. I was a ghost in their machine, a silent observer in their digital world. I didn't need a single password. I just used my skills, slipping through the cracks they never knew existed. I wasn't looking for their financial records. I was looking for the truth. And it didn't take long to find it. The first thing I stumbled upon was my sister, Anya. She wasn't the golden child they thought she was. I found a string of encrypted messages between her and a rival company's executive, a man named Marcus Thorne. They were discussing business deals, timelines, and strategies. Anya was a spy. She was selling insider information, using her position at the company to siphon off their ideas and plans. Her perfect image was a complete lie, a facade built on her own treacherous ambition. The second thing I found was about my parents. I uncovered encrypted folders with old legal documents, divorce papers that had been drafted but never filed. The love between them was a performance, a theatrical production for the benefit of their public image. They were only staying together for the sake of the company, for the sake of the family brand they had so carefully cultivated. They were living separate lives, their finances split into hidden, separate accounts. Their lavish lifestyle was a secret, shaky house of cards. But the most devastating discovery was a file simply named Trust. I had a trust fund, a small inheritance from my grandmother, that was supposed to be mine when I turned 25. But when I opened the file, my heart dropped. It was a series of legal and financial documents detailing every single transaction. Over the past 5 years, they had been systematically taking money from my trust fund. They had used it to pay for Anya's luxurious apartment, her car, and her lavish vacations. They had used it to cover up their own financial mismanagement and bad investments. They hadn't just put me at the kids' table to humiliate me. They did it because they saw me as a child, a nobody who didn't deserve to be a part of their world, a bank they could withdraw from without a thought. The money they were using to fund their perfect family image, it was mine. All of it. The kids' table wasn't just a chair. It was a statement. It was my parents looking at me, telling me I wasn't just a part of the family. I was a source of income, a piggy bank they thought they could break open whenever they pleased. I felt a cold, hard resolve settle over me. I wasn't just going to walk away. They had stolen from me, lied to me, and now they were going to pay. And the next time I saw them, it would be on my terms. The humiliation of that night had turned into a cold, quiet plan. I knew I couldn't expose their treachery in public. That would be too simple, too clean. I wanted them to feel the same vulnerability and betrayal they had inflicted on me. A few days later, I texted my parents. The message was simple. Family meeting, my place, 7 p.m. I knew they wouldn't refuse. The formality of the request, so unlike my usual carefree nature, must have intrigued them. They arrived, and Anya was with them, her face a mask of casual perfection. They expected me to yell, to cry, to throw a tantrum about the kids' table. They were ready for a familiar scene of manipulation and gaslighting. "Lida, darling, we understand you were a bit sensitive about the seating arrangements," my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. "It was just a harmless joke. You've always been so artistic." I didn't respond. I simply walked over to the TV and connected my laptop. My parents exchanged a smug look, clearly thinking I was going to show them some embarrassing photos or a slideshow of my art. The screen flickered to life. The first thing that appeared was a series of encrypted messages. They were from Anya's phone, and they were all addressed to a contact named the investor. I hit a key, and a translated message appeared on the screen, a message detailing my father's company's new contract with a rival firm. Anya's face went white. My parents' confident smiles vanished. "Anya, what is this?" my father roared, his voice trembling with a fury he usually reserved for board meetings. Anya started to sob. "It's nothing, Dad. Lida's just lying." But my parents' denial was weak. They tried to turn their anger on me, calling me a spiteful child. It was a familiar pattern, but this time it wouldn't work. The screen changed again. This time it showed documents they had tried so hard to hide, divorce papers, a detailed ledger of separate bank accounts, and records of secret investments. Their perfect marriage, their unified public image, was just a financial contract, a lie they told for their business. My mother gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. She stared at her father, and for the first time I saw genuine shock and betrayal in her eyes. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't here for their emotional reckoning. I was here for my own. The screen changed one last time, displaying the trust file. My voice was calm, a sharp blade cutting through the silence. This is a record of my trust fund, the one grandmother left me. It was supposed to be mine, but you've been draining it for years to cover your failed business ventures, your secrets, and to pay for Anya's luxurious life. I watched as my mother and father looked at each other, their faces crumbling. The perfect, loving parents were revealed to be conniving liars and thieves. The climax of my speech came next. The kids' table, I said, my voice rising, wasn't just a joke. It was a statement. It was a way for you to tell me, in public, that I was a child who didn't deserve to sit at the table with the adults, a child whose money you could just take without consequence. You didn't just hurt my feelings. You stole my future. You robbed me. My parents were speechless. Anya was a weeping mess, her career in jeopardy. I looked at them not with anger, but with a cold sense of justice. You have a choice, I said, my voice steady. You will return every single penny you took from me, with interest, within 24 hours, or I go to the police. I have all the evidence of Anya's insider trading and all the evidence of your financial fraud. The choice is yours, and for once, it's not mine. They had no power. I had all the leverage. I was no longer a child. I was a force they had foolishly underestimated. I closed my laptop and left them in the wreckage of their lies. The dinner was over, but the reckoning had just begun. The silence that filled the room after I walked out was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I left them in the wreckage of their lies, their perfect, meticulously crafted lives in shambles. Anya was sobbing, her perfect career, the very thing she used to lord over me, now hanging by a thread. My parents, David and Maria, stared at each other, their faces a mix of betrayal and shock. The power was no longer theirs, it was mine. A few hours later, a notification popped up on my phone. It was an alert from my bank. The account balance on my trust fund had suddenly surged. Every penny they had stolen, and then some, was back. They had made their choice. They had chosen to save their precious Anya from a criminal record and their company from public financial ruin. But their choice came too late. The internal turmoil had already begun. The next day, news of an emergency board meeting at my parents' company, Alvarez Designs, began to spread. Their business partners were in a panic, their stock prices plummeting as rumors of insider trading and financial fraud swirled. I hadn't gone to the police, but the sheer panic of my parents and Anya trying to contain the damage was enough to set off alarm bells. The truth, once unleashed, was like a virus, spreading through their world and infecting every part of their perfect lives. The public humiliation they had inflicted on me at that restaurant was nothing compared to the public spectacle they were now enduring. The media was hounding them, their clients were pulling out, and their reputation, their most valuable asset, was in ruins. A few days later, Anya called me. Her voice was unrecognizable, strained, and desperate. "Lita, please, you have to help us. It was just a stupid joke, okay? We'll never do it again. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them the files are fake." I listened to her pleas, her words empty and hollow. "Anya," I said, my voice calm, "you were the one sitting at the adult table. You had a choice. You could have stood up for me. You could have told them what they were doing was wrong. But you didn't. You were a part of the lie." She was crying uncontrollably, begging me to save her. But I hung up. My final confrontation came when my parents, broken and defeated, came to my apartment. They weren't dressed in their usual designer clothes. They looked frail, old. They didn't come to apologize. They came to beg. "Lita, please," my mother pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "We've lost everything. We can't lose the company too." My father, once so proud and intimidating, looked at me with hollow, defeated eyes. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said, his voice a whisper. But I knew better. I looked at the two of them, the so-called masterminds who thought they could get away with anything. "You didn't just hurt me," I said, my voice cutting through their desperate pleas. "You took away my childhood, my sense of self, and my trust. The kids' table wasn't just a place to sit. It was your way of telling me I was worthless. So no, I won't help you." My revenge wasn't about money or a party. It was about justice. It was about standing up for myself and telling them that I was not a child to be used and discarded. It was about reclaiming my dignity. I looked at the two of them, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. I had destroyed the very thing they valued most, their reputation and their perfect image, and in doing so, I had finally found my own. The kids' table was no longer a symbol of my humiliation. It was the start of a new beginning, a testament to my strength. The silence that followed my final words to my parents was the most peaceful quiet I had ever known. Their desperate pleas and broken faces no longer had any power over me. The emotional grip they had held on my life for years was finally completely gone. I didn't help them. I didn't have to. The financial restitution they made was a hollow victory, a forced confession of their guilt, and it was enough. The true revenge, the one I had been building towards all along, was already in motion. The rumors about their company, Alvarez Designs, had turned into a full-blown scandal. Board members were resigning, contracts were being canceled, and the media, sensing blood in the water, had a field day exposing the fraudulent secrets of the so-called perfect family. I watched it all from a distance, feeling no joy, just a profound sense of closure. The beautiful facade they had built for the world was crumbling, and with it, the emotional prison they had built for me. I no longer felt the need to prove myself. I was free from their manipulation, their condescension, and the soul-crushing feeling of being a disappointment. Anya, the golden child, was left to pick up the pieces of a career built on stolen information. Her ambition, once a weapon against me, was now her undoing. I knew she was a victim in her own way, trapped by the same toxic expectations that had marginalized me, but her complicity in the lies made it impossible for me to feel sympathy. She had a choice to stand up for me, to show some loyalty, but she didn't. And so she, too, was left to face the consequences of her actions, alone. My parents, David and Maria, lost everything. Their company, their fortune, their reputation, and the carefully constructed illusion of a happy family. The kids' table was the starting point of their undoing, a single, thoughtless act of cruelty that unraveled a lifetime of deceit. In the end, they were left with only each other, forced to confront the wreckage of a marriage that was never built on love. I took the money from my trust fund, a symbol of my stolen dignity, and I used it to start my own business. Not an art studio, but a cybersecurity firm. I was a professional now, a force to be reckoned with. The irony was not lost on me. My parents had told me I was not an adult, that I was not worthy of a place at their table, but by treating me like a child, they had awakened the very person who would one day bring their empire to its knees. This story is not just about a family dinner or a fight over money. It's a lesson about the true cost of lies. My parents thought they could build a beautiful, perfect life on a foundation of deceit. They thought they could use and discard people without consequence. But a single truth, like a tiny crack in a dam, can bring an entire fortress crashing down. I am no longer a ghost in my own life. The kids' table no longer represents my humiliation. It represents the moment I stood up for myself. I am Lita, and this is the story of how I stopped being a victim and started taking back what was mine.